Welcome back live to Kings of the North. Week 2 of doing this, Landis. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. This was the first goal of the show, was to make it to a second live week. Congratulations, Bill. Mission accomplished. Got my mission accomplished banner back here.
Congrats to you, because there was no guarantee. There was no guarantee we'd get here.
Shows have been canceled after one episode. So, like,
well, I was mostly considering that you go weapons shopping. You don't know what's going to happen. So
yeah, we can't. That's a weapons tease. You're not going to see that a lot. That's a weapons tease on a college football show. What we're going to do here on this Monday, first of all, if you've been with us since we soft launched a year ago and you're still here, unbelievable. Thank you. If you're new, what? Are you serious? You decided to try us? Thank you. Like Landis, we're so fired up for the whole crew that's here. Tell a friend. That would be great. Give us a thumb us during right in the middle of the show. You just give us a big old thumb, right? Yeah. Subscribe so you don't miss anything. We're feeling a little juice here on Kings of the North, and we're just incredibly grateful about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool to see some stuff growing on this channel. So very appreciative of, like you said, of everyone who's been here with us from the start, and certainly appreciative of people who have joined us in the last week or so. There have been quite a few, which is very cool to see. But excited about it. I'm glad that people are kind of, picking up what we're putting down.
Yeah. All right. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start with our top 11 and a half rankings, which again, we don't do decimals, but we will do fractions. And so on this show, everything is in the context of the playoff, but we don't want to just like do our bracket every week, because that's playoff overkill, I think. But we want to sort of rank, Landis, like our top 11 teams. We're not beholden necessarily to like the playoff rules, but we're thinking in a playoff manner. And then the half is a team that's on our mind that we're maybe not ranking yet, but we're keeping an eyeball on, right?
Yeah, I'm certainly not holding myself to especially the top 4 thing with the playoff, right? Right. If I want to rank 2 teams from the same conference in the top 4, if I want to rank, say, Notre Dame in the top 4, I'm going to do that now. And if I had to make a playoff bracket, I'll move some stuff around. But this is, I'm thinking about this more. I keep the playoff in mind, but it's more for me, like kind of voting in our own little AP poll. Which is to say that, like, I don't know about you. I took results pretty heavily into account now that we have games, and my rankings might look a little weird to some people because of that, but I'm okay with that, because listen, they're going to play an entire season, and those results will help things shake out. But yeah, early in the year, it'll get a little wonky. It'll get a little aggressive with movement, I think, from time to time, but I think that's fun.
Aggressive with movement is another part of this show that we want. We want to be aggressive with movement. I will say, I got a view of your rankings, and I was jealous that mine weren't weirder. So, I respect it. I respect it. Then we're going to run through. We're going to touch on all of our 28 Northern teams. That's kind of a vow that we're going to have for now, unless we feel like it's not a good show. But that's what we want to do on Mondays, recapping. We want to touch on everybody in the North. And then Thursday, we want to preview and pick everybody in the North. So that's our plan. We do have some categories: team of the week, team that got me excited, team that changed my mind, a guy that blew my mind, team with a big question, game that kind of bored me, game I'm glad I saw, Bill. So we'll run through that. And then we're also going to, everybody who didn't fit in a category, we'll hit them too. And then we have a little bit of G5 stuff at the end. And maybe some weapons talk.
Maybe
not like we don't want to make light of weapons.
Swords.
Now you called it weapons. Now we're just giving.
You put it on social media, man. What am I supposed to pretend like your Twitter account doesn't exist?
It's a tease. That's a tease.
I didn't. You don't have to. Social. You don't have to show it. I'm just saying, like, stay tuned for swords.
Ooh. How much? What is the appropriate way? Woo. What's the appropriate way to?
Probably not the way you just did.
So here's the thing. This is sharp. This is legitimately sharp. And they gave me a piece of cardboard that it came in. And on the cardboard, it said, "Explain sword care." So I got sword care explained to me. But I think the thing they didn't say is that the #1 rule of sword care is don't cut your own arm off. And that still could happen. So that's not the official sword unveiling. That's the pre-sword unveiling.
Okay.
And you want to know?
That's crazy.
Here,
I can't believe you got that.
Well, look at this. Look at this. This is my sword. Ready for that? This is my sword. So do you know what this is right now?
What's that?
That's your sword.
What?
I'm not sure. I don't think this sword can live in your house. But
it definitely cannot. Yeah.
For when you come over to play. It's like you have a
before we started recording the show, my wife said, "Did you get a sword?" And I said, "I don't think so." She said, "Well, Doug bought 2." And I said, "I promise we won't have a sword in our house."
Yeah. We do a football show.
Yeah.
So hold on a second. Now we're in sword play early on. Hold on. I got a crown too. I got a crown.
Wow.
Yeah. So if I have a sword and a crown, I'm officially a king of the North, right? Now, I did not buy a throne because thrones are like $50,000. But I don't think. Are you going to see this? I'm not here to call people out. But are you going to see this on Joel Klatt's podcast? How about that, Joel Klatt? You going to see Andy Staples do a little bit of this? How about that? You going to see Ari with the sword? Oh. How about that?
I think Ari's the last person I want to see with a sword.
Yeah. Take that. You think that you guys see this on Josh Pate? So this is what we're bringing you. We're bringing you college football talk. Swords are so heavy. How do people swing them and kill people with them? I cannot even walk around with this in my hand. I'm exhausted.
John in the comments said, "I'm scared for Doug right now. Please don't hurt yourself."
Yeah. I'm scared for me too. My wife's not home. So if my wife is home, because when she's home, she has this on, and then she would be running upstairs and yelling, "Put the sword down." But she's in a different country today. So I can play with okay, let's talk about what's that? What was that? Yeah. Okay, sorry. That's not professional. There's so many people. There's new people here. And I brought my swords out too early. Rankings. We each did rankings, and we'll start with yours. Let's start with yours because yours are better. And we'll run through yours, and then we'll do mine.
Okay.
Because I hate everything I've said on this show in the first 2 weeks of the show. I don't even know why I say it. I believe it when I say it, but then I think, no, do you actually think that? So I hate my ratings already. Let's do yours first. Your top 11.5.
My top 11.5 are Penn State at #1, Notre Dame at #2, Georgia at #3, those Miami Hurricanes at #4, Texas 5, Ohio State 6, Alabama 7, Oklahoma 8, and then rounding out the bottom half or bottom portion, Michigan at #9, Oregon at 10, Utah at 11, and then the team that I'm thinking about, and it's not necessarily a team I would rank. I wouldn't rank them 12th. I don't think if we were doing a 12th spot, but I'm thinking about Iowa. I'm thinking about Iowa after what we saw this weekend. So, yeah, that's it. That's the top 11.5 for me.
I have so much respect for you putting Penn State #1. And again, so we want to have guests on here, right? And so I was listening. I was listening to Ryan Russillo's show. He's another guy.
He doesn't have a sword.
No sword.
Yeah.
This is like I'm going to do a social media like check mark and list every show and just say, do they have a sword? No, check mark, no check mark. Do we have a sword? We have 2. I was listening to his show. He's doing college football preview. And he was talking about rankings, and he was like, yeah, a couple years ago, there's a guy who tried to do blank slate voting and not count ratings in the, rankings in the preseason and start everybody fresh or whatever. But I was like, that's me, right? Like, that's me. So I want to have him on because he mentioned how I vote, but also I was on a local cable access show with him like 24 years ago. On local cable access when they couldn't get anyone else to show up because they didn't pay you. And one time it was like me and Ryan Russillo and Stephen A. Smith. And look at us now. We're the big 3. We're the big 3 of sports media.
Was that a CN8?
It was a CN8 show in Philadelphia for anybody who watched that. Yeah. It was like 2 future stars and literally we couldn't get anybody else. So So like the rankings, like I still love thinking about rankings this way, but I couldn't do what you did. And do you think Penn State, so the rankings aren't out yet for this week because they're waiting. They're not going to come out till Tuesday because they're waiting for the Boston College Miami game on Monday night. Do you think anybody will actually vote Penn State? Sorry. Do you think anybody will actually vote Penn State, Boston College, Florida State? Anyone will actually vote Penn State #1? Do you think they will get a single #1 vote in either the AP or the coaches?
I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah.
But don't you think they should?
Clearly, yeah, I do. If I were voting in the AP poll, I think I'd vote Penn State #1. I would vote Penn State #1. I put my top 11.5 together this way because I thought you would. I'm a little surprised that you haven't.
I know.
Because you can't like. So what I did was like, okay, did every team play a game that would shake up the rankings this way? No, but like kind of the handful that did, I gave them credit for it. So that's why my top 4 are the team that beat West Virginia on the road, the team that beat Texas A&M on the road, the team that destroyed Clemson in a neutral site game, and the team that destroyed Florida on the road. And then the rest of it just kind of fell into place with teams I probably would have had ranked there kind of no matter what the result was, as long as they won. So, yeah, I don't think anyone will vote Penn State #1. I'd imagine actually my guess is that Georgia is practically unanimous #1 after this.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right. And guess who else voted for Georgia? I'm so embarrassed. Okay, Mike, show my rankings. Seriously. I can't wear this hat ironically anymore because I'm just in the bags for the dogs in such a big way. I have Georgia #1, Penn State #2, Notre Dame #3. So we have the same top 3. I just love the dogs. Texas #4, Ohio State #5, Utah #6, Oklahoma #7, Alabama #8. #9, I have Kansas State. #10, I have Miami. #11, I have Tennessee. And the team that I hate myself for having 11.5 with my eye on them is Ole Miss because they scored 4,000 points. And I don't want to give somebody credit for scoring a bunch of points against a bad opponent, but I feel an overmatched opponent. Teams aren't bad. They just have to play these games to make money against an overmatched opponent. But there were enough other teams that did not do that to overmatched opponents, Landis, that I was on this show in the preseason. I sort of was down on Ole Miss. And I was sort of like, what? Do I have to pay attention to Jackson Dart? And then their offense was like clearly very functional. I also think Lane Kiffin was like trying to make a point, but there were a lot of teams that I thought were going to come out and try to make a point in week 1, Oregon and Washington among them. And a lot of teams didn't come close to making that kind of point. So I have to keep eyeballs on Ole Miss, and they're going to be in the top 10. I noticed you didn't rank them either. So you're also not keeping eyes on Ole Miss, right? You don't have them in your top 11, do you?
I didn't have them in my top 11. I think mostly because I don't think I would have had them top 10. Yeah. Just sort of like blank slate coming into the year. So I get what you're saying about, putting a beating on a team like that, but that to me doesn't pop you into the top 11 because Utah did the same thing and Oklahoma did the same thing and Alabama did the same things, right? So it's I don't have a problem with it. It's just like they were one of the teams that did that I left off.
So those are our rankings. I mean, it does tell you something about where we think. I did not rank Oregon and I did not rank Michigan. And I am very open to sliding people all over the place week to week, but I was much closer to ranking Michigan than I was to ranking Oregon. And it does seem like a statistical anomaly. There was just some weird stuff in the Idaho game where the yards were out of whack, but the score was close. And they're not the only team that sort of did that this week. I watched a couple other games in the North where I thought, man, like you watch the game and you think, I thought that with Pitt. I thought that was Wisconsin to a degree. That's like, how, and then you look at the score and it's like, they're almost losing this game. But for Oregon to do that against the Idaho team when they were favored by 50, I don't think Oregon's a terrible team, but I would drop them for that performance until they show me something more. And they're going to have the chance to show something this week against Boise State, who we will wind up talking about later. But I think Oregon comes into week 2 like very much having to reassure everybody who picked Oregon to win the national title or anything, because it was just a really weird opener when you figured Dan Lanning was going to come out and stomp on people.
Yeah, I think if you were, and I'm not saying you did this, but and I think your logic is sound. The final score like makes you raise an eyebrow. If you look at how the game played out, it's like Oregon turned the ball over on downs twice. I think they might have fumbled another time, kind of going in potentially to score. So, and then Idaho scored one of their touchdowns on a trick play. It's like statistically, Oregon dominated that game. It just should have ended up with probably 4 more touchdowns, and then we're not talking about it. But you got to finish drives, right? Finishing drives is important. And if you want to talk about Ole Miss looking crisp to start the year against an overmatched opponent, Oregon certainly didn't look that way. So I think it's fair to not have them in.
All right, those are our rankings. So now we're going to start running through our categories, and we're going to do this way. The categories might change, but we want to be comprehensive. And listen, we are here to serve an audience, Bill, and we think we're serving it in a different way than most other shows do because nobody else is leaning into the North quite like us. We acknowledge the South exists, but for instance, I do not have any plan in our green highlighted rundown to talk about LSU, USC at all at the moment. I do not. It is not our focus, but I do think, and like, I don't have any plan to talk about Clemson, Georgia, right? So if people want us to do that more, we will, but that's where we are right now because we're spending all our time really like rewatching and trying to read up and check stats on our Northern teams, and that's 28 teams. But do you feel weird at all to not be talking about that Brian Kelly went like this? Like that's going to be every show, every other college football show on Monday is going to be.
Yeah.
Are we okay not doing that?
I am okay not doing it.
Okay.
I think we, if anyone was with us last year, we practically totally ignored all that stuff. Like clearly we're not with our rankings. I think we'll have segments throughout the week where we like turn an eye toward those teams. But yeah, it's not going to dominate our conversation like a lot of other shows. And I am very much okay with that. Okay. So we don't want to have you looking for something that you're not going to get. The one thing I will say that the thing that matters about this game is because USC is like an observer of the North. We acknowledge that they're not in the South, they're not in the North, but it's Southern California and it's in the Big Ten. USC, I think, did show everybody in the Big Ten something that when you think about that they have Michigan in September, that Penn State has a road trip to USC, USC is really going to matter to the North. And if this defense, again, it's Iowa on the opposite side of the ball. USC does not need to have the best defense in the country, but if they have a competent defense, it's a game changer for them. Just like if Iowa has a competent offense. And I think everybody came away from Sunday night thinking the USC defense might even be more than competent. So if that's what's on the table here, and people remember that Lincoln Riley's pretty good at offense and Zachariah Branch is a game breaker and Miller Moss might have a little something, USC, I think, comes into the mix then. Do we expand our list of true contenders in the Big Ten from 4 to 5? Do we go from Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan to adding USC to that top group? Maybe even ahead of Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin? Like, is that a conclusion that we should be drawing now? Like, be on alert for USC? Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I would say yes to that. I would put USC based off what I saw in that one game sample size against LSU ahead of an Iowa, ahead of a Wisconsin, ahead of a Nebraska. And also now, because we've talked about like quote unquote easier paths this season for teams like Penn State and Notre Dame. Well, they have to both play USC. So I'm rethinking kind of my view on those schedules as well with USC in the middle of it.
Okay. All right. Let's move into some of our categories. We're going to start with our team of the week. And my team of the week is the team that we've been talking about, which is Penn State, even though we talked about, and if you guys want more of this, we did a post-game show on Saturday. If you didn't watch it because you were in bed or you were out at the club or doing whatever at 11 p.m. on Saturday night, we talked a lot about Penn State. We talked a lot about Notre Dame. We talked a lot about Michigan. We talked a little bit about Ohio State, a little bit about Oregon, but my team of the week is Penn State. And there's a couple things I want to note. I do think the idea that Trey Wallace maybe is showing up as a true number one receiver. He had 8 of the 17 targets in their passing game. I thought that was a big deal. Again, I thought the run pass mix was really good. Nick Singleton had 13 carries. Katron Allen had 10. Cam Wallace had 8. Drew Aller ran it 7 times, and Bo Prabula ran it 4. I really like that mix. They had 62 offensive snaps. Drew Aller was on the field for 51 of them, and Bo Prabula was on the field for 20. So I was clueless of what was happening at the game that I was at, but that's 9 snaps with both of them on the field. That's super interesting. And on the defensive side of the ball, I do think, right, we always are ready for a really good Penn State secondary, Bill. Their safeties were like this. You knew the safeties were going to be good. Maybe not questions about corner, but curiosity. Zakee Wheatley, Jalen Kimber, and A.J. Harris are the 3 corners who got all the snaps. Jalen Kimber, a transfer from Florida. A.J. Harris, a transfer from Georgia. Like, this is what it looks like. We understand there are going to be some things where maybe the South will take some things from the North. There will be some things where maybe the North takes some things from the South. Like, the portal conversation right now after week 1 is look at Dabo. He doesn't do it. When you don't do it, you miss out on opportunities like this for Penn State to have a corner from Florida and a corner from Georgia and put them on the field in week 1 and make life, I thought, pretty difficult on the West Virginia passing game. So a tip of the cap to the people who are doing it. These are the rules now. So obviously a lot of warranted discussion around Penn State's offense, but I thought, like, okay, if this is your secondary and some safeties you believe in, like Jaden Reed, like this looks like a group that's going to work.
Yeah, I thought going into that game that maybe West Virginia might be able to exploit the newness of Penn State's secondary, and that definitely wasn't the case. I was pretty impressed with that group, and that's kind of the only question you have with that defense. And it wasn't even are they going to be good. I like eventually they were going to be, just how good, how quickly, and they looked like they hit the ground running, I think, in that first game. So this should be a typical Penn State defense that we've seen over the last few years, and now they're pairing it with an offense that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. All right. Who's your team of the week?
My team of the week is Notre Dame. I would have picked Penn State had you not, but then in the name of mixing it up a little bit, I went with Notre Dame. I think if you take into account not necessarily the caliber of opponent, because I do think, like, as you said on Saturday, that Texas A&M is a little overhyped, and that offense was bad, and Connor Wegman was awful in that game. But that's a tough place to play. That's a tough place to play with a brand new offensive line and a brand new quarterback, and you got a new offensive coordinator. And they went in there and, like, they did enough. And I thought it was the most impressive win a team had this week. I think just given the newness of Notre Dame and given the environment that it had to go play in. Like, definitely Georgia's win against Clemson was impressive. Penn State's win against West Virginia was certainly impressive. But I thought Notre Dame maybe showed me the most of anybody going into this game, because this is a team that has opened with games like this in the past, or has played these kind of marquee non-conference matchups the last couple of years against Ohio State and just didn't quite seem ready to win a game like that. And Texas A&M is not nearly the test that Ohio State was in either of those opportunities. But I thought that Marcus Freeman's program took a serious step forward with going to Texas A&M and winning this game. And as I said on Saturday, like, I think their offensive line now is going to be much better off in the long term for it. They did it basically without Mitchell Evans, who I think is still Notre Dame's best offensive player, or at least not quarterback. Offensive player. He dressed and played some, but he was not out there for every single snap. So you're taking away a weapon from Riley Leonard that he will have long term, and they still found a way to win. I thought that there was enough at receiver, particularly maybe from Bo Collins with a big catch late in that game, that makes me think that Notre Dame might have a little more playmaking on the outside this year than it's had. And like Chris Mitchell didn't really get going in this game, but I think he's going to be good. And then the running backs were really good. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, I think both look like they can be dudes for this team. So, and I had basically no questions about the defense coming into the year. They played exceedingly well against Texas A&M. It was all about what Notre Dame's offense was like able to muster against A&M, and then maybe gave you glimpses of that you can grab onto moving forward. Because this is also a team that's really not going to get tested again until November when it hosts Florida State. So there's a lot of time to build momentum and continuity with the offense too, that I think is really exciting. So they're my team of the week for the result that they got, but they're also my team of the week for how that result might now spring them forward into a favorable couple of weeks here where they can really start, I think, stacking some stuff.
Okay. All right. Our next category is the other team that got me surprisingly excited. And you are all in on the Iowa Hawkeyes on here. And again, I talked to people, like, the first half, everybody was like, it's same old Iowa. And then they went crazy in the second half. Like, is that what got you excited about what Iowa did on Saturday?
Yeah, I was one of the same old Iowa people in the first half. They started out punt, field goal, turnover on downs, punt, field goal. That was the first half for Iowa. And then they started scoring touchdowns. And I think my thing with Iowa, we talked about this when they made the change from Brian Ferentz to Tim Lester at offensive coordinator, and it was, can you get me another touchdown per game? And I am a believer in the third. I'm a believer in the third touchdown now. They averaged 15 points per game last year. I think they will exceed that this year. They put up a 40 spot on Illinois State, and like it's an FCS team. How much stock do you want to put into that? It's the most yards they've had and the best yards per play they've had in like 5 years, and they played some pretty bad teams in that span too. So like, I don't care who they played. The fact that they showed the ability to do this on offense meant something to me. So like Cade McNamara, I thought settled in a little bit. Caleb Johnson, the running back, did not play in the first half and then ran for like 112 yards in the second half. Luke Lachey, I thought looked good. It was nice to see him back and part of the mix offensively. And they might have a receiver who's worth watching too, and true freshman Reese Vanderzee, who is the first true freshman to start a season opener in the Kirk Ferentz era, and he had 2 touchdowns in this game. He looked pretty good, looked pretty explosive, looked like a bit of a playmaker. So there are some pieces there that are interesting, and it's not. I'm not saying watch out for Iowa. Here comes a top 25 offense. I'm saying Iowa might have like the 85th best offense in the country this year, and that's pretty good for a team that plays defense the way they do.
And it's just, well, I mean, like if it had continued the whole game like it did in the first half, people would be going nuts right now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that they got through that, and that Cade McNamara got through that. I know people were joking that, like, I saw some joke that was like Kurt Ferentz fell asleep on the couch in the second half, and his wife called Seth Wallace and said, like, go ahead and let it rip now. He fell asleep. You know, like, it's just like I thought it had a chance. I thought it would be clunky for Iowa without Kirk Ferentz and all this, and that I think Lester's going to be better than people expected, but that it wasn't in the second half, that it didn't take a whole game, just took a half.
Yeah.
Great credit to Iowa for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Look good.
All right. Team that got me surprisingly excited is Purdue. And this is a Purdue team that I did think would be better than being picked last in every Big Ten preseason poll. Hudson Card, 24 of 25 for 273 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think the miss was a deep shot that he barely overthrew, like on the second drive of the game. Jamal Edrin's like a 6'3" receiver who looks like a dude. I thought he was really impressive to watch. Their tight end was good, Max Clare. We talked about Shamar Rigby as a true freshman at receiver, and Terrion Grant as a true freshman at corner. 2 guys in the backfield with Devin Mockabee and Reggie Love. I just thought that this looked like, and again, we understand overmatched opponents. We do understand that.
Sure.
But if Jamal Edrin's like a #1 receiver, and I just thought Hudson Card looked settled in, and there's another guy that I'm going to talk about in a second in the Big Ten who's a transfer quarterback in year 2. Right, Joe Burrow transfer, but in year 2 is when he hit. Michael Penix, year 2. Bo Nix, year 2. Sometimes we get psyched up for the first-year transfer quarterback, and then the second-year transfer quarterback, we're like, he wasn't that good in year 1, and you kind of give up, and that's actually when it happens. So I was looking for this. Dylan Thienemann's a nice punt returner, too, besides being a good safety. I was was on alert for this, and again, overmatched opponent, but I thought Purdue showed me something, and I'm getting a little excited for Purdue Notre Dame in September. I'm not calling a shot on the Boilermakers or anything, but like really good first game for Ryan Walters and those guys.
We mentioned this last week. So Purdue's off this week. They get 2 weeks to prepare for Notre Dame. And we know what Purdue can do to good teams, or has done in the past. Yeah. So like to start the season this way, like I had an eye on it. Like I thought there's 2 things with Purdue. One, could the defense take a step forward? And it seems like they have. I guess we'll learn more when they play a team with a little bit more of a pulse. But it was also about what the jump that Hudson Card can make, because you and I both liked him when he transferred there. Saw some upside that he didn't demonstrate all that much last year. So if this, not to say he's going to do this every week, but if this is more of an indication of where he's headed, then I think there's reason to be optimistic there.
All right, so let's go to a similar conversation for me. This is the category, the team that changed my mind. And I'm ready to just like admit defeat, not admit defeat, just admit that I was wrong already on Illinois. Because I thought Illinois was going to be at the bottom of the Big Ten. And I thought they had a lot that I really liked. J.C. Davis, who popped in the spring as a transfer at left tackle, is just, he's awesome, man. Like, right? Like, Wyatt Milam was really good for West Virginia before he cramped up in that game, but like J.C. Davis is really good. We've talked about some of the other, like our all northern tackles, right? Ursery at Minnesota and the Oregon guys and all these things. Like, we got to put J.C. Davis on this list too. He's awesome. And then we have a northern Derrick Henry. Are we doing this right? Everyone calls it. We're not calling this overreactions, because as soon as you call it overreaction, you can say anything. And then it's like, I didn't even mean it. It was an overreaction. This is a reaction. I'm not claiming this is over. We have a Northern Derrick Henry. Caden Fagan is 6'3", 250. And last year he was big. He had like 100 carries last year, but he didn't look as quick, I thought. And I thought he looked like a downhill monster, like with good feet at that size. 16 carries for 108, and then Aiden Loffrey, 9 carries for 79. Caden and Aiden make the shirts. Make the shirts for the Illinois backfield, and then they have like multiple targets. And I thought Luke Altmaier looked really settled. And they mentioned that on the broadcast, that he thought like his biggest problem last year is like his mind wasn't in the right place and he wasn't allowing himself to play well. And he was too worried about making mistakes. I thought he looked incredibly in control. And they brought in Zachary Franklin in the portal late, who's like leads all active NCAA receivers in everything. He's really good. There's a couple other receivers that they have that are like legit dudes. And I just thought, I don't know, brother. Pat Bryant had a really good game at receiver. He had a couple touchdowns. Malik Elzy had a 34-yard touchdown. That was really good. Luke Altmaier was the first Illinois quarterback with 4 touchdown passes in the first half since 2015. Sign me up for this Illinois offense. And again, like I am fired up now for Luke Altmaier and Caden Fagan against Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal. Kansas coming into Illinois this week. Like, let's go. I think Illinois is going to be ready for that game. Am I too hyped on Illinois?
No, because I think Illinois like showed you what you would want to see from them in an opener like that, right? Like,
yeah.
For me, it's running the ball. If they can run the ball and not have Luke Altmaier in situations where he has to throw the ball 45 times a game for you to think you have a chance to win, then that's a pretty nice sweet spot, I think, for Illinois. So if they can come out and run the ball against Kansas, even if they don't win, if they can run the ball against Kansas, I'll buy that as being real. And then I would also be changing my mind on Illinois too, if that's the case. Yeah.
Is Northern Derrick Henry too much? You watch that guy?
Yeah, he's a dog. Run? I like him. Yeah. I like him a lot. I think it's I mean, physically, it's a really good comparison, right? He's just like a big, tall, upright runner. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So again, like if you haven't watched Illinois play offense recently, like tune in. It's a great week 2 slate for the North, but like Illinois, Kansas is moving up the list of games that like I am super curious about. All right. That's the team that changed my mind. What's the team that changed your mind?
The team that changed my mind is Pitt, and you and I each have a thought on this, so I won't try to step on your toes too much as it relates to Eli Holstein. I would just say that for me, it was the offense clicking faster than I thought it would. And there was a couple things there too. I expected quarterback shenanigans in this game from Pitt when Pat Narduzzi names Nate Yarnell the starter in spring. There's like a back and forth in camp. He names a different starter going into the year, but I think pretty strongly intimates that both are going to play. I came into the season looking at a situation where like, okay, they're going to have some back and forth at quarterback. This is going to be clunky as they try to figure things out. And then he just sort of played Eli Holstein like he was a starter. And then the offense looked really good. So if this offense has found its footing, and maybe it's too much to say that it's found its footing when you're playing Kent State, but I thought it was far more impressive than I believed it was going to be, even for playing an opener against Kent State. It'll be tested now moving forward with Cincinnati and West Virginia coming up. Like that, those are more true tests of actually where they're at. But I thought offensively they looked great. They looked explosive. I guess it helps that there are a fair amount of Western Carolina guys that came with Cade Bell to help the system maybe take hold a little faster. But Eli Holstein looked comfortable directing it. Desmond Reed looked great as a running back. I think he had like almost 200 all-purpose yards in this game, maybe over 200 all-purpose yards. I think Pitt has weapons at receiver and tight end. And this was a team that I had like kind of scraping its way to a bowl game because I was totally unsure of its offense. And now I'm thinking maybe this is a team that finds that threshold a little more comfortably, maybe pushing for something more like 7, 8, 9 wins if this offense is going to look how it looked in the first week.
Yeah. So we have another category that's guy that blew my mind. So Eli Holstein from Pitt is that for me. And it is about having a guy who can run this offense. They want to run a play every 15 seconds. This is a perfect YouTube TV team to record because when you hit the fast forward button on YouTube TV, it goes 15 seconds ahead and it's just like play. Oh, wait, they snapped it in 13 seconds that time. I got to go back. It is wild. They had a play. This is the thing that stood out to me. At the end of the first half, they Is it the first half or the first quarter? At the end of the first quarter, Desmond Reed got tackled with 13 seconds left on the clock. He didn't stand up until there were 10 seconds left on the clock. And they got a playoff before the end of the quarter, and he ran for 28 yards. He stood up with 10 seconds left, and they were like, let's go and run a play. So Eli Holstein, you have to have a guy who is capable of like handling all this. And I think that must be why he won the job from Nate Yarnell. Yeah. Nate Yarnell's a bigger guy. I don't even know it's about arm strength. When Eli Holstein got the ball out in rhythm and on time, they were almost unstoppable. He threw a pick, and he could have thrown 2 more. So when they aren't fast and when they aren't out of his hands immediately, when he holds it, when it's like first read not there, second read not there, then it's like, uh-oh, they've got to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And also, this game was much closer than it should have been. Coaches love to talk about complimentary football. I think Pat Narduzzi and first-year offensive coordinator Cade Bell are going to have a complimentary football conversation at some point, because the offense was working perfectly and there was some goofy stuff happening, and the game was closer than it should have been for a little bit. So there's a lot of potential in that offense. Shout out to all the Pitt offensive linemen who kept up. They played like 80 plays. They had more plays in the first half than they averaged per game last year. Like, it was just wild. But they need the trigger man for it, and I think Eli Holstein's there's a lot of potential there, Landis, isn't there?
Yeah, there definitely is. And like, I don't even know, like, Eli Holstein, did he play last year at all?
I don't know if he played at all. Might have played 2 plays or something. Yeah.
So for him to look that comfortable basically in his first college action, I did think was pretty impressive. To your point, like, wasn't perfect, but you just look for a quarterback who seems like he's like comfortable and in control. And I thought Eli Holstein looked that way in an offense that was probably pretty hard to control if you're not super experienced in it, right?
He had the second most dropbacks in the Power 5 behind Dylan Gabriel in that game. So I want to shout out Ryan Baer, Branson Taylor, Ryan Jacoby, BJ Williams, and Lyndon Cooper, who were the offensive linemen who had to keep up with that thing. It looks like they're in a 2-minute drill the entire game. Like, that's what it looks like. If you try, so again, this is one of those, there's all kinds of highlight packages and stuff out there you can go find. Just watch them for 5 minutes. It's super interesting. And you had to find the right guy to do it, and it was Eli Holstein. Who blew your mind, Landis?
Jeremiah Smith, the freshman receiver at Ohio State. Could not have possibly had more hype about him coming into the year, with the way that teammates and coaches and media talked about him. And like, he always did something in practice and people were going crazy for it. And it's like, okay, maybe when he gets into the opener, it'll take a little bit of time for him to find his legs, because he's a freshman, and that's like typically the case for freshmen. Wasn't the case. 6 receptions, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns in Ohio State's 52-6 win against Akron, and he looks like he is Will Howard's go-to guy. Will Howard targeted him a couple of times on 3rd down. They drew up a screenplay on the first drive that was blocked incredibly well and absolutely would have gone for like a 60-yard touchdown had Jeremiah Smith not dropped the ball. So after an offseason of hype around this kid and everyone wondering that he was going to back it up, Ohio State went out of its way to draw something up to try to get him a big play on its very first possession of the season. I think it was the second play of the game, and it didn't quite work, but I think that speaks to how Ohio State is viewing Jeremiah Smith as part of its offense. So he's awesome. It might be too much to say. Like, it's hard. Everything you say about Jeremiah Smith feels hyperbolic, but I think this is a guy who's like in the conversation for best receiver in the country, possibly by the end of his freshman year, which is kind of insane to think about.
There's that. We're not going to talk about it. That McMillan guy for Arizona went bonkers, right? So that's like
McMillan. Yeah.
He had like 400 yards. But yeah, in the conversation, it's one of those things you have to acknowledge. People love underdogs, but like living up to the hype is a thing too. So I think it's worth acknowledging Jeremiah Smith and how good he was. All right, next thing up is team with the big question off of week 1. And your team is
the Michigan Wolverines. I don't know that they know what their offensive identity is going to be. And in some years, that's probably okay. But they play Texas this week, and it's about that. It's about Michigan looking to me like a team that is not nearly ready for that test on the offensive side of the ball. But I have longer term questions about it too. After a quarterback competition that didn't seem to have a whole lot of clarity really at all throughout the summer, and part of that is the way that Michigan handles media, like just nobody saw anything. So I get that, but I don't think anybody believed coming off of last season going into this one that Davis Warren was going to be Michigan's starting quarterback. It really seemed like they were gearing up for an Alex Orji-led offense. And then it turns out maybe that he's not good enough to be Michigan's quarterback. And their offensive line, I don't think played very well. I don't think anyone outside of Colston Loveland really kind of did anything to pop in my mind on offense against Fresno State. And Fresno State's a good Group of 5 team. It's one of the favorites in the Mountain West. It wasn't it wasn't like the teams that were getting 72-0 losses put on them in some of these non-conference matchups. But Michigan should still handle its business. And I thought Michigan might have a lower scoring game, only because like it was going to be one of the situations where they only had the ball 6 or 7 times and maybe score touchdowns on 4 or 5 of those, and that's it. This was a Michigan offense that like I think at times struggled to move the ball, struggled to finish drives, had to settle for field goals a couple times, and just didn't have really a functioning piece of its offense, in my opinion, outside of Colston Loveland looking pretty good and Kalel Mullings, the running back at times, showing me some stuff. So I don't think they're ready for Texas, and I wonder just exactly what the offensive ceiling now is long term.
And USC probably matters more to Michigan than anybody else, right? That this is the other. Now, this is also coming in September at the Big House. If USC is going to be Michigan is going to have the better defense in the USC game, but if USC is going to be functional on defense, and then Miller Moss and Zachariah Branch and those guys are going to try to let it rip, like you might be in a situation where Michigan offensively is going to have to try to keep up a little bit, and Texas is going to be the same thing. Yep. So, that's the one thing is that, everyone saw all the plays last year when J.J. McCarthy on 3rd down would do something to keep a drive alive. And I think that's, if you believe in the run game and like 3rd down, do you have a quarterback who can keep a drive alive? I think is the main question for me. And they're going to find out. They're going to find out this month. This is what you get. And it's like, I hope it doesn't discourage anybody from scheduling stuff. It's not, they couldn't control where USC hits on their Big Ten schedule, but like, awesome that Michigan and Texas are playing on Saturday. It is a tough spot for Michigan. So the team that I have a big question about is Wisconsin. And I'm worried that I'm being a little bit disingenuous here, because I think the reason I have a question about Wisconsin is because sort of like they didn't hit anything big, and they kind of just like grounded out, and they were trailing against Western Michigan in the 4th quarter. Tyler Van Dyke wound up 21 of 36 for 192. His ADOT, which is average depth of target in week 1 among power conference quarterbacks, was 64th out of 72 who were ranked. But here's the thing. Below him, Dylan Gabriel, who's supposed to win the Heisman, Riley Leonard, who beat Texas A&M, barely ahead of him, Carson Beck. So sometimes I'm like, oh man, all they did was throw short stuff like that. And then it's like, oh, you mean how you win? Bo Nix didn't throw a pass 10 yards down the field last year for Oregon. They dinked and dunked everything, and it worked. So Pitt was so fast. Pitt versus Wisconsin. Pitt had 6 possessions in its first half, and that was with Pitt returning a punt for a touchdown, which like took a possession away from them. Wisconsin had 3 first-half possessions against Western Michigan. They had a 6-minute and 32-second drive where they missed a field goal. They had a 6-minute and 39-second-yard drive where they scored a touchdown. And then they had the ball at the end of the first half, 2 minutes and 58 seconds, and kicked a field goal. It was like slow and methodical. They really only stopped themselves. They had some red zone issues, but like it made me wonder if they're going to try to compete at the next level up. Tyler Van Dyke is an experienced guy coming in as a transfer. I maybe wanted to see in week 1 like a little bit more, but then I think, well, dink and dunk works sometimes. And Eli Holstein almost threw a couple picks because Tyler Van Dyke also almost had a couple picks, especially in the red zone, that could have really hurt him. They almost lost. They were down 14-13 early in the 4th quarter, and they punted, and it hit a Western Michigan guy, and they recovered, and that's how they scored the go-ahead touchdown. So they got really lucky. But then when I thought about it, I was like, well, maybe it wasn't quite as bad as I think, because they sort of were just like methodical, but they need to find a way to be more dangerous on offense. And they were going to run. I get it, but you keep waiting for the Phil Longo offense to strike fear into people, and it's now 1 season and 1 game where it hasn't yet been the case.
Yeah, I don't. So the other category we're going to get into is game that bored me, and I had this game there. It's the Wisconsin Western Michigan game. And it's just what you said. Like I expected to see more from Wisconsin's offense. I guess like board is relative, right? Because it was a close game in the end that Wisconsin had to pull away. So I guess in some respects that's kind of exciting. But when you're looking for that Phil Longo offense to really kind of take a tangible step forward off of last year, this was not that to me. I saw like Jesse Temple at The Athletic had an article was like, is Wisconsin actually better than it was last year? Like the jury's still out, right? I thought that was kind of a bummer of a debut for Wisconsin against a Western Michigan team that might be okay in the MAC, but also I think is not going to be very good defensively this year. I saw our guy Tyler Shoemaker had Western Michigan's defense, I think maybe is the worst in the Power 5 last year. So in his power rating. So like I can't imagine they've taken a tremendous step forward in that area. Western Michigan plays Ohio State this week, so I guess we'll get an idea of how good that defense actually is. But for Wisconsin to not move the ball a little better, to not score more, to not look more explosive, I found to be very disappointing. And if you look at, I'm sure you've seen this before. Parker Fleming has like the net EPA. Did we really lose as bad as we thought we did? This was practically even between Western Michigan and Wisconsin. So week one-ness, yes, like I get teams aren't always crisp in week one. Wisconsin should not be practically even with Western Michigan. I thought it was a bad debut for Luke Fickell's team.
Speaking of like things people react to in the first quarter, I think it was Wisconsin's first drive. They had a 3rd and 9 in their red zone. Western Michigan only rushed 4, and they got a little bit of pressure, and Tyler Van Dyke took like a pretty quick check down short of the sticks. It was incomplete, and people were just like throwing short of the sticks on 3rd and 9, and like it was off, and it's like, I get it, but there's an opportunity there. Slide out of the pocket. It's only a 4-man rush. Wait for a route to develop. And it was like, man, like this guy's played a lot of football, right? So not at Wisconsin, but you maybe wanted to see a little bit more. The game that bored me, this might not be the right description. I put Michigan State when actually Aiden Childs just came out and started chucking the ball down the field the whole game. The first pass of the game was like a play-action 35-yard deep shot that should have been completed, and it hit off the guy's hands and instead was picked off. And Aiden Childs, his ADOT, average depth of target, was like through the roof. It was like 14 or something. All he did was chuck it down the field. But it was such a chaotic game. It was chaotic boring to me because I never got a handle on it. And it was Florida Atlantic and Michigan State, just like they were sort of trading turnovers and trading mistakes and trading scores early. The first score of the game was a safety. But then this is where it got really boring. The first 6 drives of the game for Michigan State, they scored 16 points and had 150 yards. The last 8 drives, they scored no points and had 143 yards. So they were up 16-0, 14 minutes into the game, and they won 16-14. And it was like, okay, their last 8 drives were punt, end of half, punt, interception, downs, punt, the game ended. Aiden Childs was 5 of 14 for 57 yards after they were up 16-0. So they had that Lacey guy. Was it Kyron Lacey? What's his first name? The Michigan State guy. Big guy who sort of like popped at running back beyond Nate Carter, who was my fantasy pick. It was a terrible pick. But Aiden Childs said, take the over. And I'm not like throwing stuff back in guys' faces. Aiden Childs said, take the over. And they scored 16. So
the over was low though. It was like 45.5. So he actually wasn't being all that brazen when he said that. But they still
were like 2 scores short, 2 touchdowns short of a 45-point over. So it was just like, it was like a really weird game, but they were like, it wasn't because they dinked and dunked. It's because like there was no rhythm to it, and they were chucking the ball down the field and like not really hitting much. So yeah, I don't know.
It was Kyron Lynch Adams is the running back here.
Kyron Lynch Adams. My apologies.
Transfer previously of Rutgers and UMass.
My bad on that. I should have known that. I wrote it down and I couldn't find it on the sheet. So anyway, I wanted more from Michigan State too. I just wanted a little bit more. So
yeah, so did I.
All right. Game I'm glad I saw is Colorado, and this is old, but I just want to note this because again, I thought there was kind of like, did you feel like there was a little bit of like a negative reaction to Colorado? Like,
yeah, but I don't
over North Dakota State.
But yes, but I don't know that I found myself disagreeing with a lot of it. So
disagreeing with the negative reaction?
Yeah, because I thought the reaction was this is the same Colorado team, right? Quarterback, receiver, bad defense, offensive line still looks suspect, which I think was kind of my view on it too. So what did you think?
So I thought that the defense and the offensive line actually did what they had to do in the second half in a very losable game against a very competent opponent. I picked North Dakota State to win this game. Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter are unbelievable. They are unbelievable, and it is always worth watching them. But the thing I noted, do you know how many touchdown drives Colorado had all last year of 6 minutes or longer? Touchdown drives that lasted in totality at least 6 minutes last season.
5.
None. They put the game away against North Dakota State. They were up 24-20 late in the third quarter. They went on a 17-play, 80-yard, 8-minute touchdown drive that was finished off by the Travis Hunter glitch catch. That's like, you can't believe he caught it. They converted 4 third downs on that drive. North Dakota State immediately answered with a long touchdown drive. But if Colorado does not, A, score, but B, hold the ball for a while and score at that very instance, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, they lose. They marched. They took it until the middle of the fourth quarter, 8 minutes in. 8 minutes left in the game until North Dakota State got their hands back on the ball. And when they did, they were down 2 scores. It wasn't like they were running over people. There was still a lot of throwing there. Dallin Hayden broke a huge open field tackle for a 14-yard game on a check down. Shedeur was really smart in that series, taking what was there and taking check downs. The script of this game was Colorado up early, North Dakota State wear them down and win late. And Colorado, that drive didn't let that happen. And it's not like they just leaned in behind the offensive line, but I don't know that Colorado last year would have done that. And I thought this game was set up for them to lose. And so, like, I was impressed by that. I was impressed by that drive. And I thought that wasn't noted. Like, I get it, but I thought it wasn't all flash and sizzle. Like, I thought that was a very substantive football, down and dirty, take care of business way to win a game. And I thought it was I came away thinking much more it was a good win than, oh no, same problems for Colorado, they're in trouble. Maybe it's because I thought North Dakota State, from what I learned in a week, was quite a competent football team.
Yeah, I'm not there with you. I don't think it to me just kind of felt like Colorado of last year. I think it's good to point out that drive, especially if it's something they had not shown the capability of doing before. But like, they couldn't run the ball. Their secondary stinks outside of Travis Hunter. Defensive line was maybe a little better. Like, Dan Hayes definitely popped a little bit for me in that game, in a way that
Pitt transfer. Yep.
The transfer from Pitt. So it's like they might have a guy or two up front that's certainly better than they had last year. And I do think the offensive line will get better over the course of the year. But when they don't run the ball and Shedeur Sanders still gets pressured on 30% of his dropbacks against North Dakota State, that to me feels like same Colorado. And part of that's on Shedeur, because Shedeur just holds the ball for a long time. Yeah. It's not always on the offensive line. It was a nice win. I think it was a losable game that they won. So like, credit to Colorado for doing that. But I don't know that I guess I was maybe hoping to see Colorado look noticeably improved on both lines of scrimmage and in the secondary. And I don't think I saw that.
Travis Hunter was 50-1 in the preseason as a Heisman pick. What do you think he is right now?
I don't know.
25-1. It got cut in half. I'm not sure why he's not 12-1. He's the 11th Heisman favorite at the moment. Nobody's better than 8-1 at the moment, which means there's no favorite. Dylan Gabriel went from like whatever 3 or 4-1 to 8-1 after Oregon's opener. I'll tell you, man. I mean, I'm just trying to think of like the story of the season. Travis Hunter laid it down, man. He played like every snap on both sides of the ball, had 3 touchdown catches. And I think people are going to want to vote for that guy. He's got that Lamar Jackson unique quality where you watch the guy and you say, I've never seen anybody like that, or I haven't seen anybody like it since a long time, which is how Lamar Jackson won for a team that wasn't a national title contender.
But they won 8 games. Colorado's got to win games.
Okay. Paul Hornung won it when Notre Dame had a losing record. So if Paul Hornung could do it, so could Travis Hunter. All right. Who's the game that you were glad you saw?
I'm glad I watched Maryland and its season opening win against UConn just to see what was going on at quarterback there. They did not name the starter coming out of camp, and not name the starter going in until we really kind of saw the first snap of that game. It was between Billy Edwards, MJ Morris, the transfer from North Carolina State, and Cameron Edge. And it was Billy Edwards, who we assumed was going to win the job, that got the start. And similar to Pitt, like, he was the starter. There was nothing that happened throughout that game where Mike Loxley showed anything other than confidence in Billy Edwards to be the team's quarterback. MJ Morris did play. Cam Edge did play toward the end of the game, but it was the Billy Edwards show on offense. And I thought he looked good. 20 of 27, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns at 39 rushing yards. Was making some tough plays, like took a shot on one play. He's got to protect himself, I think, a little better, but he took a shot, he popped back up, and he kept playing. And Maryland's offense just looked a little more competent than I thought it was going to look in an opener. And like, it's UConn, right? So take it however you want to take it against a team like UConn. But there was certainly an opportunity with the quarterback competition playing out the way that it did, and just turning it over from a guy like Taulia Tagovailoa at that position in general. It could have been clunky. It could have been, let's run the ball, let's stretch this thing out, let's win this game 21-7 and get out of here while we still try to figure things out on offense. And it was the opposite of that. It was Maryland putting points on the board in a hurry and winning 50-7. And I think Billy Edwards looks like a guy who can go win some games for Maryland this year. So I was pretty impressed by him, even though it was just UConn.
And I might be wrong there. Maryland was like the other Big Ten team that I sort of had really bailed on. It was interesting. Every quarterback battle in the North that was up in the air, will play both guys, was a lie.
Yep.
Nobody played both guys. Every coach was like, we'll take it right down to the wire and not really tell anybody, but we actually do have a starting quarterback, which is good for the teams that they actually have starting quarterbacks. Okay. Those are our categories. We're still going to like check in on everybody else in the North that we didn't have a category for. But after this first break, when we come back, I'll call it a short film. I think short film is the right description. If you've never gone sword shopping, KOTN will help you live that experience. Next on Kings of the North.
Kings of the North at the Ohio Renaissance Festival. We're here to sword shop. We will see what happens. Can we find a reasonably priced KOTN sword among these medieval folk? So actually that was incredibly easy because they have a sword store here. So look for these on Kings of the North if I don't cut off my own arm first.
And that was the sword. That's how you shop for swords. You go in, you find the sword store, and then the guy sells you a sword. I said, is there like a waiting period? You know, like a 48-hour waiting period to have to do a background check for a sword? And the answer was no.
Oh, that's interesting.
I just banged them together by accident. So anyway, this was going to be the big sword reveal, but we couldn't wait. I'll tell you what, though. Can I be honest about something here? I'm not sure about the crown look. I think I kind of look like Queen Elizabeth because my AirPods look like pearl earrings, and I am not quite as regal as I want to be. And not that I'm against looking like Queen Elizabeth, but I really look like her. Oh, hello. Ooh. I just do that. This is my, oh, hello. We're doing a college football show. Might have to get rid of the crown. I bought 2 swords to be a man. And I look like the Queen of England. I have a crown person too. Someone helped me shop for this crown, and I feel like, so that's a king's crown, right?
Yeah.
Jaunty? I don't know.
It's a king's crown, I think.
Would you wear a crown?
No. I want to know if are we gonna etch the name of the King of the North for every year into that thing like it's a Stanley Cup or what?
Oh my God. That is such a good idea. Oh, Caitlin Stark. Mike suggests I can be Caitlin Stark. Yeah. Yeah, we can etch. I asked them about etching because I wanted them to have him, maybe have him engrave KOTN, and they were like, just go to the mall.
They got a guy at the mall who can engrave.
They're just like, you know how you go to the mall and like you get a flask for your bachelor party, guys, and you go get it engraved at the mall. I'll just bring my sword to the mall, wearing my Queen Elizabeth crown. It'll be great. No one will look at me weird.
You don't have to answer this question with specifics. Were they reasonably priced swords?
What is a reasonably priced sword? I had a sword threshold in my head, and they were under the sword threshold, which is why good. I got two. I wasn't going to get two. Man, I'm disappointed by the crown. Okay. Woo! Hello! Look like Mrs. Doubtfire. So we will go. I'm going to hang the swords in the back wall some way or another. I'm going to put them between the banners. So anyway, that was sword shopping with Doug. Let's jump into the other teams that we didn't cover. One quick thing about all these teams. We'll start with Boston College, who is the last team to play. They're playing Florida State on Monday night. This is the ACC traditional Labor Day game. And Florida State has already played, and Boston College has not. It's at Florida State. It starts at 7:30. Boston College is a 16.5-point underdog, and I cannot figure out which way to go with this, Bill. Thomas Castellanos, some good skill at Boston College, a decent offensive line. But then I'm worried that Florida State's going to be mad. So I don't have a handle, but maybe it's a good showcase for the Eagles and Bill O'Brien to get eyeballs on them.
Yeah, the teams that were thought to be perhaps the best in the ACC have not had a tremendous start to the season. So maybe Boston College can pull an upset.
Look at you. Are you picking Boston College to win the ACC? Is that are you dancing on that dance floor?
Who am I picking there? After all this that's happened? Who am I picking to win? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I'll pick Boston College. No, Miami's going to win the ACC. Sorry.
Yeah, Miami can cram it. Okay. Yeah. One quick thing on Minnesota. What do you got?
There's a lot of things on Minnesota. I thought that was a pretty stinky game for Minnesota.
Yeah, but they should have won. They also should have won.
They should have won. I don't think Dragan Kesic, our guy, the field goal kicker, did miss 2 kicks in the game that Minnesota lost 19-17. Including one at the buzzer from 47 yards out and a 27-yarder earlier in the game that also would have won the game for Minnesota in hindsight. The thing for me, though, was Minnesota's offense just looking out of sorts, I think. Like lacking, I think, really anything in the way of explosion. It did play without Darius Taylor, its star running back. Daniel Jackson, the receiver, did play. So Marcus Major was their leading rusher in this game. I didn't think the offensive line played very well. And Minnesota just left itself in a lot of third and long situations and ended up 4 of 12 on third down in this game. And they're just clearly not built for that. Even with Max Brosmer, I think, being an upgraded quarterback from Ethan Kaliakmanis, he looked a little, maybe things being too fast for him in his first game at the FBS level. I think he'll be okay long-term, but some stuff to figure out for Minnesota's offense.
I watched the Minnesota game live and then I rewatched it during the lightning delay of the Penn State West Virginia game. I changed my mind on it on the second watch. It wasn't as bad as I thought. I thought you could see how it would work itself out. I think they got caught in between. Max Brosmer had a slow start. PJ Fleck even said that. And then I think they got reluctant to kind of let him let loose. And then they, I thought it was like in a 2-minute drill. I thought he did let loose a little bit. I think they got caught in between, especially without one running back. I think they have a chance to look like much better by the end of the month. And they still almost won. It was right there for the taking. That's a tough loss for Minnesota. All right. My one thing from Nebraska is I've been saying the quarterback's name wrong. So is that okay for the guy who's about to take over college football for me to acknowledge that it's Raiola, not Rayola?
Oh, I think I've said both. So it's good. Yeah. So it's Raiola.
So we need to understand this because he looks like Patrick Mahomes more and more every day. We are approaching Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan territory of how much is coincidental? How much is it that you admire the guy? And now how much is it like now you're trolling us? He's flipping sidearm passes like him. Again, every part of him, he got sacked. And I thought he hit the ground like him, but he looked really good. 19 of 27, 238, 2 touchdowns. And again, playmakers. When you're matching up some playmakers with the quarterback, Isaiah Nayor, like a really nice play on like a little deep ball flip, and he broke 2 tackles after he caught it and then went in for a touchdown. He had 6 for 121. And then Jamal Banks, really nice, like deep ball, not deep ball, kind of a jump ball, corner of the end zone. Raiola gave him a shot. He had 4 for 61. No turnovers, no turnover-worthy plays. Like for a true freshman, again, he's never true freshman. And there were some veteran dudes out there trying to give it away. Really good. Dylan Raiola, 19 of 27, 238. Like, it is just getting started, and sign me up for Shador versus Dylan on Saturday, brother. Woo.
Yeah, that's going to be a banger. I can't wait for that one. Cincinnati, one thing for me. Brendan Sorsby, I think a really strong debut at quarterback for the Bearcats. He passes for 383 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns. He ran for 2 touchdowns. He completed north of 70% of his passes. He's a guy that I really liked coming into the year as someone with upside and maybe with some better, more reliable weapons around him, which I think he has at Cincinnati compared to what he had at Indiana last year. Maybe something pops there. And it's just one game against Towson. They won 38-20. But I thought it looked how you would hope it would. Like if you thought you were somebody who, if you were someone who thought that Brendan Sorsby might be able to surprise some people this year, I thought he had a nice debut. And the weapons around him did pop too. Really long touchdown run for Evan Pryor toward the end of the game. Corey Kiner, we know he's good. Xavier Henderson had a nice game, and Joe Royer, our tight end, 89 receiving yards in this game. You got 2 guys you can throw the ball to. You got some reliable running backs. You got a pretty good offensive line. I think this Cincinnati offense is interesting. Don't love giving up 20 points to Towson, but I think Cincinnati might be able to score a little more maybe than I was anticipating coming into this year. And now you're looking at a Cincinnati Pitt matchup this week with 2 potentially pretty fun offenses.
Love it. I cannot explain how good they think Joe Royer is going to be at Cincinnati. Like it is the real deal. And I paired this with Indiana because it's just crazy. Brendan Sorsby is young, right? He's young. He only played 1 year at Cincinnati. He's a 3rd-year college player, right? And he only played 2 years. He started 1 year at Indiana. He was only there for 2 years. It's not like a late career transfer. But this is your team still. But like, it's wild to me a little bit, like that he's this good and just was out the door with the new coaching staff.
Yeah, Kurt Cignetti just seemed like I'm getting a new quarterback, right? Like I'm remaking this roster and I'm starting with the quarterback position. So they go to Curtis Work. What a nice game, I think, for Indiana. I don't know if Curtis Work's play or the passing game in general was the thing that popped the most for me. I think 2 things did kind of supersede that. One was the defense I thought played pretty well in a 31-7 win against Florida International. And the other thing was the run game. They spread it around a lot, really throughout the entire offense. They spread it around a lot, but they had 3 guys who were like kind of toting the ball for them in different points of the game, and all of them were transfers. Elijah Green from UNC had a 51-yard touchdown run late in that game. Tyson Lawton, who's a transfer from James Madison, ends up being the leading rusher, and I thought looked pretty explosive at times. And then Justice Ellison, who's probably the best of the group, Wake Forest transfer, had 10 carries for 68 yards. And the thing that stuck out to me was like digging through some box score stuff a little more. Averaged almost 5 yards per carry after contact. So he was running through some stuff too in a way that was pretty impressive. So I had just assumed that given the track record of Cignetti and his staff, his offensive staff at JMU, that they were going to try to air it out a little bit. Maybe this is more of a run-oriented offense when you have 3 running backs like that who you can trust. And then one more thing from that game, in his post-game press conference, Kurt Cignetti seemed kind of upset that people laughed at halftime. And he said, we have to create a Power 4 environment here at Indiana. But to his credit, he also said that starts with us playing better. So he wants the folks in Bloomington to hang around a little longer to watch the Hoosiers win some games this year.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Okay. I mean, that's it. You want to raise that. You can't, it's hard. You can't yell at your fans that's not a good way, I don't think, to get the fans to come, right? You have to put the product out there. And when they play better teams, I think it'll get them to stick around more. But that's an interesting, it's not, I guess, I don't think we're shocked by that, right? No. But it's an interesting way to go about it. Okay. Yep. All right. Washington. They had like maybe the best receiving core in the country last year. So who's going to catch balls for them this year when everything has changed? 16 of their 23 receptions in their win over Weber State were to 2 guys, Giles Jackson and Denzel Boston. Denzel Boston, my guy, I've been talking about since spring. Giles Jackson, 10 targets, 10 receptions. 98 yards. So I like that. And then Denzel Boston was very active early, 8 targets, 6 receptions for 76. Will Rogers just looks like a veteran guy who knows what he's doing. But when you have Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, and you're that good, you're establishing something there. And I thought for Giles Jackson and Denzel Boston to sort of stand up and be like, okay, we're going to be the 2 guys here. I thought that was good for them. And they have, what's his name? Jeremiah Hunter from Cal, who's also, I think only had 2 targets, but you got to figure out who you're going to throw it to. So I thought that was good for the Huskies to have that.
I like Giles Jackson. He has some juice to him. I remember the thing, whenever you say Giles Jackson's name, he's like the guy who scored the first touchdown for Michigan in 2021 when they beat Ohio State up in the big house. But I thought he popped at times last year for Washington's offense and in a position where it was really hard to, given all they had at receivers. So I'm not surprised to see him step up.
All right. The Oregon game. We talked about it some on Saturday night. I just want to read Dan Lanning's main quote about them outplaying Idaho and only beating them 28-14. We don't live in hypotheticals. That's the score of the game. That's the reality. There are things that we did that put us in situations where we didn't get to finish drives, and that's the reality. They stopped us on 4th down at times. We went for it. They did a great job stopping a punt fake. So there were some opportunities out there that we didn't take advantage of, and they did. The score is what the score was. So that is that. Dan Lanning has been a guy who's been aggressive on 4th down, and it has not worked out for him every time in the past. I'm curious about the learning curve here. And nobody, very seldom do you ever get anybody who's like anti-aggression. Well, there's some old school people probably who don't like it, right? Just take the points. But it's just like it's an interesting thing again that we're sort of talking about Oregon playing well, and after some 4th down stops, maybe not having a score that represents how well they've played. And I'm just curious to watch that.
Yeah, I've got some more on Oregon, I think, later in the show when we wrap up. I want to ask your thoughts on.
Okay, Mike, our producer, tells us, by the way, that they've taken the or off the depth chart at quarterback at Pitt. So it was Eli Holstein or Nate Yarnell, and they've replaced it with a duh. It just says DUH there. It's like, it's Eli Holstein. And that's no offense to Yarnell. It's just like Eli Holstein's ready for this. All right, Kansas, what you got?
Yeah, they smoked Lindenwood 48-3.
Yep.
Jalen Daniels only played the first half. Looked fine, 148 yards, a touchdown, a pick. Devin Neal looked good. Rushed for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns on 8 carries. I don't know that there's a ton to glean from a game like that, but there were a couple of things that popped out to me when I think about now going up against Illinois. Kansas did not generate a ton of pressure on Lindenwood, and Lindenwood was 7 of 16 on 3rd downs. And like
the young edge guys, everybody was fired up about the young edge guys.
Yeah, and Lindenwood held the ball a little bit.
Okay.
And Illinois, as we discussed earlier, like ran it pretty well, obviously in its opener. And I'm just wondering, not necessarily if that's a vulnerability for Kansas, because I don't think you can say that after one game against a team that was playing an FBS team for the first time. But it's like now an area where I'm wondering if Illinois might have an edge based off of what Kansas showed there. Like it was a perfectly fine opener for Kansas against a team like Lindenwood to win 48-3. But if you're like poking holes in it and looking for something, maybe the defense needs to be a little sharper against Illinois than it was against Lindenwood.
That line 5.5. Kansas favored 5.5 at Illinois. All right, Syracuse. Kyle McCord, 27-40, 354 yards, 4th most passing yards in the North. This is primarily about opportunity. We're talking about the ACC. I again bet $2 on Syracuse at 60-1 to win the ACC. They're down to 40-1.
Uh-oh.
Here are the teams with better odds.
Cash out.
Cash out for $2.11. I've done worse. Miami, Clemson, Florida State, Louisville. They're the 4 favorites in the ACC. NC State, Virginia Tech, SMU, Georgia Tech, UNC. UNC, who should have lost to Minnesota. SMU, who should have lost to Nevada. Virginia Tech, who did lose to Vanderbilt. They actually lost that game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
NC State, who didn't look great. Florida State, who lost to Georgia Tech. Clemson, who got blown out by Georgia. That's a lot of teams ahead of Syracuse. They have a chance starting this weekend. Home versus Georgia Tech at noon. Syracuse is a 3-point underdog, and just be ready. Kyle McCord did have, I think, 4 turnover-worthy plays, according to PFF, which was the most of anybody in the country. So he did throw it well, but also there was some stuff that like was a little on the edge. So you got to cut that down. He had 4 alone. That's the highest of anybody in week 1. Hughes is just like right on the edge of like getting people to take notice. So like that's all. Like it's like I'm super curious now for the because it's thanks to Georgia Tech, but like they're getting the team that beat Florida State in the Dome at noon on Saturday in week 2. So let's see what's up.
Yeah, big game. I think Syracuse, no matter which way this year goes, is going to be a very watchable team. I think those games are going to be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, BYU, what you got?
The Jake Retzlaff show, baby.
Let's go.
You alluded to it. BYU quarterback competition in camp. Again, very close to the vest. Kalani Sitake did not name the starter until, well, he named the starter in-house in the week leading up to the game. They revealed afterward, but the starter was not revealed publicly until day of game. Jake Retzlaff was like kind of bragging about how he was part of the ruse and was pretty excited that they kept people off the scent of who was going to be BYU's, starting quarterback in this game. And we talked about BYU Southern Illinois as being a potentially kind of bumpy, uncomfortable spot for BYU. It was not. 41-13. They hammered Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois retooling some stuff on defense, which I think is maybe important to take into consideration. But Jake Retzlaff looked really good. It was not an in-game competition. He played the whole game. Gary Bohannon came in at the end, played 8 snaps, didn't throw a pass. It was all Retzlaff. 20 of 30, career-high 348 yards, 3 touchdowns. Man. I think the big things were no turnover-worthy throws and no picks. He got a little loosey-goosey with the ball at times last year and was not in this game. And then a 13.5 average depth of target, too, for Jake Retzlaff. So he was really pushing that thing down the field. He was slinging it around. And the offense had a nice day, which is, I think, a good confidence booster, if nothing else, for BYU. And it seems like maybe they have a quarterback after an offseason of uncertainty.
All right. I'm going to kind of lump my next 3 together because there are like 3 quarterbacks that we talk about together all the time. Kansas State, Iowa State, West Virginia. Avery Johnson, Rocco Becht, and Garrett Green. So like they're just all, and Iowa State and Kansas State both go to Morgantown this year. Kansas State, DJ Giddens did run for 124 yards, which was a big deal. Avery Johnson threw in 37 rushing yards, 14 of 21 for 153 yards, but really a defensive effort for Kansas State against UT Martin. The defense held them to 2.4 yards per play, which was really good. Chris Klein is from American Pie.
Great actor. He's actually a terrible actor.
He is a terrible actor. He is legitimately maybe the worst actor I've ever seen on screen. But if he wants to come on Kings of the North, we'd have him on. Yeah. Hey, guys. Like, it's one of those things, like, he plays a lunkhead, and it's like, is he playing a lunkhead? Because, like, in American Pie, it's like, man, that guy's playing a lunkhead. Then he was in another movie, and it's like, oh, he's a lunkhead.
Yeah. He's from Illinois. He's of the North, so we can have him on.
All right. Sorry. We take it back. If he was from Georgia, we would keep saying it. Good defensive effort, and I think like eased Avery Johnson in. Like, I think it's fine. I don't know there was a lot to glean from that. The deal for Iowa State is that Caleb Bacon's hurt. Like, their best defensive player, arguably, was taken in the locker room on a cart in the first quarter. Just like reading and what people are saying, like, it doesn't sound great, which just is terrible news for Iowa State. So, like, I don't think they've put out exactly what the deal is at the moment. But if it's not good for them, he's sort of the heartbeat of that team, a former walk-on, and it's just terrible to lose a guy like that in week 1. And it didn't devastate them in that game, but it certainly, I think, changes the tenor of Cyhawk this week if he can't play. Of note, North Dakota, after he went out, had a drive that was 23 plays, 88 yards, 12 minutes, and 24 seconds. Which, when you pull your best, that's where the magic happens. But like, that's almost Colorado-like. You pull your best defensive player off the field, and that gets a little easier to do. So it's just like, it just stinks for Iowa State that they are dealing with this and stinks for Caleb Bacon. We hope for the best, but I don't know that it's going to be the best.
21 points. If anyone sees that, I think it's alarming. I think Iowa State only had like 6 or 7 possessions in that game, right?
I mean, they gave up a 12-minute, 24-second drive. That's like, well, 1 quarter was gone. So it's like they scored 21 points in 3 quarters. So what are you going to do? And then just watching the Garrett Green press conference after, I hadn't seen it by the time we talked about it on Saturday night. Again, just they were so down. Like, he was so dynamic. Again, just like you see a guy in a suit. He's wearing like a blue and gold suit at Big 12 Media Days. And like, there's so much potential there. And then you're just tired and beaten down and sweaty and talking about how like you and the center had never played a game together before and couldn't get on the same page and you messed up the snap timing. And it's like all this stuff. It just was as frustrated as we talked about that Neil Brown clearly was. Garrett Green was the same. And, you know, that it's so frustrating that like, he's talking about you missing a throw by a yard on the first play of the game. It could have been a 30-yard game. And it's just, they just weren't on. So it's like, there's nothing new there with West Virginia. Just to see the quarterback feel the same way as the head coach, it just stinks for them. They just did not play the game they wanted to play. So they've got to find a way to bounce back.
Yep. I agree.
All right. Utah for you.
We've been breezed through this one pretty quickly. They pounded Southern Utah in a way that I thought that we believed that they would.
Yeah.
I had been more than 600 days for Cam Rising since he had played a game, more than 700 days for Brent Keithy since he had played a game, and both just seemed like they were having a really good time out there in the season opener, which was really fun to see. Cam Rising, 10 of 15 for 254 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Brent Keithy had 4 receptions for 69 yards and 3 touchdowns. 4 of Cam Rising's touchdowns were to people who could not have been more wide open. So, like, what do you take from it? I don't know, other than it's really nice to see those guys playing. He threw 2 to Keithy, where Keithy was just like running down the middle of the field by himself. He threw 2 to Dejon Stanley on the exact same play. There were wheel routes where no one covered the running back. Really long touchdown plays. The last touchdown, Keithy did like catch the ball at the 3 or 4 yard line and fought through a couple of defenders to score. So it was nice to see him tested, I guess, a little more physically to see how he held up, and he held up fine. So the offense looked good. The offense looked explosive. Southern Utah had no chance, but yeah, welcome back, Cam Rising and Brent Keithy.
Welcome back. And then Rutgers is old by now, but you still have Rutgers thoughts, right?
I have a Rutgers thought. Well, I have 2. 44-7, Rutgers beats Howard. Rutgers scored on the last play of the game. As time expired, they scored a touchdown. Howard's coach was not too happy about that. I'm a little surprised, because if that happened to Greg Schiano, he would have flipped out. So I'm a little surprised.
It did happen to Greg Schiano in the past, and he did flip out.
So
he went like this.
You keep playing. I get it, but it was just funny to me to see that happen. The big thing there, I thought, was no Notre for the season, which we've talked about. And then Tyreen Powell, who's coming off an Achilles injury, also did not play. So Rutgers was missing its 2 starting linebackers I thought it was going to have coming into this year. And they had some guys step up, including Daryl Jabome, making his first career start, played 57 snaps, which tied for the most in the defense. And he had 14 tackles in his first college start, which was pretty impressive. Third-year guy from Canada, stepping up in a big way for Rutgers defense. And as they're looking to kind of patch that hole, they're going to get Tyreen Powell back, but they're not going to get Mohamed Toure back. And they're looking for guys to step up there. Maybe DJ, which they call him, is a guy who can fill that void for them.
I'm thinking maybe every time we say Rutgers' name on the show, I pick up a sword because they're the Scarlet
Knights.
It makes sense. You think that should be a thing? Yeah. And then I put it down when we talk about Northwestern, because they're Wildcats, and Wildcats don't have opposable thumbs. Northwestern, good defensive effort against Miami of Ohio, held Miami to 267 yards total. Mike Wright, the new transfer quarterback, 18 of 30 for 178, ran for 65. Sellout crowd of 12,023 in the new temporary stadium, and everybody seemed to have a good time. But that defensive efforts are the real thing there. David Braun is a really good defensive coach. Tim McGarrigle taking over as the defensive coordinator this year. Like, not much happening for them. I think it's going to be a little bit of a home field advantage for them, but they held them to 6, right? I mean, you don't win a ton of games when you only score 13, but Northwestern did. I think they have maybe stumbled into something with David Braun. I just think there's something about this guy, and maybe they go 1-11 from here on out. But like, I think he's a good coach who will win you a game on Saturday, right? Which is like a real thing. So that's a good win for Northwestern. And then I think we have 3 Northern Friday night games, but one to watch is Duke at Northwestern on Friday night. So everybody, if you want to get eyeballs on this temporary stadium at Evanston, you can do it on Friday.
It looked great. The pictures looked awesome.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder why they just don't play there all the time.
I know. Maybe they can just start. They haven't started building the new stadium yet. They tore down the old one. I mean, they could just put a Burger King there and just say, we'll play on the temporary thing. Who cares? All right. Last quick break. When we come back, little touch on the Group of 5. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North, I bought a dragon who sits on a throne too. Anybody wants? Do you like that?
Oh, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. And then I sat in a throne like that and took a picture of it, but I could not buy that throne.
I want to meet the people who are dropping 50 large at the Renaissance Fair to buy a throne.
Yeah. That's a pretty cool dragon. I thought this was very affordable. This is very affordable.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely scouted out all kinds of stuff to get. I was asking everybody if they do customized designs. So I definitely was scouting out like knights cloaks for next year, maybe, and like whether you could get KOTN on them. I looked at some like a chainmail thing to put on your head. That was like $600 for chainmail for your head. If it was like 50, I'd be wearing a chainmail head thing right now. So, you know, I saved the money for the big guns. It was my birthday. It was just my birthday. I got swords for my birthday.
A man should be able to buy swords on his birthday.
Yeah, that's right. All right. We call this is your title, G5 minutes. Get it? G5 minutes. So is this just Boise because they have like the best player in college football?
Well, there's two things we need to talk about. I think, yes, the first is Ashton Jeanty, the running back from Boise State, who had 20 carries for 267 yards and 6 touchdowns in a 56-45 win against Georgia Southern. He might actually be the best player in the country. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you, because, you know, when we think about I did this last year a lot too, when I was like looking through stuff for like players of the week or like all North teams. I kept putting Ashton Jeanty in there, and they're like, no, he's group 5. We don't use him. Should we be considering him when we do like all North stuff and King of the North stuff, because he is of the North and he is so good?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have to. I think that's fair. We have to draw a line. We just can't also cover Boise State and Wyoming and North Dakota State and Toledo and Kent State like we do everybody else, because then we'd be talking about 60 teams, and we just wouldn't be able to do that in an intelligent fashion. But when we're talking about individual great players and individual moments and that kind of thing, I think maybe we should. So let's officially declare that when we do our all-North teams, we're talking about individual superlatives, that guys, as long as you're in the northern part of the country, it doesn't matter where you play, we'll take you.
All right. I love
That's
it.
fair.
I'm glad we can do that. Yeah.
Boise, by the way, dropped 651 yards in that game.
Yeah.
651. 280 passing, 371 rushing. They also had 90 penalty yards. 8 penalties for 90 yards. So that's that's 651 minus 90. But that's just a wild game, and they were like a pretty heavy favorite in that game, and it was a game for a while against Georgia Southern. So like did you is not that Oregon's on alert, but how much trouble do you think Boise might give Oregon in week 2, given what we saw from those two teams in week 1?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think Boise can probably run the ball on most teams it plays with some success, right? So if Boise can run the ball effectively and efficiently and limit the amount of time that Dylan Gabriel and that offense have the ball, then I think it's a close game. I don't think I'm picking Boise to win that game, but I think it's a close game.
Okay. Do you think that, like, is Boise just absolutely anybody who's not picking them to make the playoff at this point as the group of 5 team is crazy? Like, is it that obvious? They are minus 125 to win the Mountain West at the moment. UNLV plus 650, 360. Fresno State, who was my pick, who lost to Michigan, and I felt like competed pretty well defensively, but offensively maybe didn't make as many. I mean, Michigan's defense is good. They're plus 500. So Boise State, like an overwhelming favorite to win that conference. Did that reaffirm that for you? That, I mean, Oregon, we're talking about teams playing twice. Oregon and Boise might play twice.
Yeah, they could. That is still my pick for the G5 playoff contender.
Okay.
Liberty is always going to be out there because Liberty is not going to lose a game, but they play a really bad schedule. And they're not of the North, but I think worth paying attention to in this conversation. Coastal Carolina beat the crap out of Jacksonville State. That was a game that people thought was going to be close because Jacksonville State, I think, is going to be pretty good this year, and Coastal Carolina crushed them. So that is a team worth watching, too, for that G5 playoff bid for sure. That
is coached by formerly of the North, Tim Beck, right?
Yeah.
Of Nebraska and Ohio State. And he went to North Carolina State, with the Texas and stuff, too. So, okay. Yeah. And then Wyoming, we did the G5. Our G5 pick was Wyoming, Arizona State. And I think we both picked. Did we both pick Wyoming? Or we thought it would be close and Arizona State won by 90?
You picked Arizona State. I not only picked Wyoming, I said definitively and very chesty, I think Wyoming's better than Arizona State. Arizona State won 48-7. So yeah, misread for me on that one.
Yeah. My goal, I mean, we're not going to say things to do it, but we're just going to say things that are going to be wrong. But I'd love to be on somebody's bulletin board. I would love if Kenny Dillingham was like, Kings of what? Kings of what? That would have been a great post game.
Yeah, that was a good old-fashioned butt whooping. What Wyoming was down 2 running backs and its tight end, who's probably its best offensive player. They still give up,
which you knew before the pick, and you were like, it doesn't matter.
I didn't know they'd be down 2 running backs and their tight end. But either way, I was way off on that one. Good for Arizona State. Congratulations.
Good for Arizona State. One. All right, so we wrap up. I think we'll wrap up every Monday. Give ourselves a little buffer with what else you got. I don't know that I got much anything else other than that. I remain fascinated by. I'm very curious to see how this Brian Kelly LSU thing plays out. So like we will wind up. We originally had a Monday segment called like how hard can the South cram it, and we were going to give a rating on a cram it scale. And I feel like that fits our vibe, and we probably should be rating things on a cram it scale. But I prioritize getting through our northern teams first rather than cram it. And I don't want to tell people to cram it without really knowing what I'm talking about. Like when I tell you to cram it, I really want to have my feet planted. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be, I guess they can cram it. So I didn't feel like I was going to be able to have enough of a handle on Southern football by Monday for the cramometer. But should we bring the cramometer in later in the week?
We should bring the cramometer in. Yeah, because we got to talk about Dabo. We got to talk about Brian Kelly. Then we got to talk about Virginia Tech.
They're a border school. We are not taking you, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Sorry. My gosh. To Vandy for real? Okay.
Yeah.
What else do you have that you want to talk about, though?
I got a couple things. I'll try to get through them quickly. One, or actually 2 of them are kind of injury related. I did not mention this in the Utah part, but Utah lost starting cornerback Keenan Johnson and defensive tackle Aliki Vamahi in that game against Southern Illinois. It seems like Keenan Johnson could be pretty long-term, and maybe both of them are long-term. Kyle Whittingham said for both of them, like, it doesn't look great. And Utah just dealt with a bunch of defensive injuries last year. So I think it's worth monitoring. They are not particularly deep at cornerback. They're talking about having to move some guys around to replace Keenan Johnson. So just something to watch for Utah's defense. They had a rough go of it last year with injuries and started off this year kind of not on the right foot with that. Another injury, this is a 2-pronged thought on Syracuse. Syracuse linebacker Marlo Wax left that game in the second half, was in a walking boot in the second half, and Fran Brown said he's probably going to be out a couple of weeks. He was like maybe the only guy on their defense that played well in that game against Ohio. And Syracuse came out of the first week ranked 128th in the country in rushing defense. They allowed 255 yards and 6.5 yards per carry to an Ohio offense that was returning only 2 starters. And neither of those 2 returning starters were the guys that led them in rushing last year. Northwestern transfer Anthony Tyus III went for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 carries. He forced 14 missed tackles, according to Pro Football Focus. And Syracuse, as a team, missed 47 tackles in that game. Georgia Tech is going to run the ball on them if they don't clean that up.
Yep.
So, like, that makes me very nervous. Like, missed tackles are a thing in week 1, but that was not a particularly inspiring run defense effort by Syracuse. And now they're playing against a team this week that is going to want to try to run the ball down their throat. So I think that's something to watch. And then the last thing, I just want to say that I think maybe we did not discuss enough the impact of Oregon losing center Jackson Powers Johnson. I thought that the middle of Oregon's offensive line looked a little shaky against Idaho. They're starting a walk-on at center in Charlie Pickard. It's like a great story. Local kid, like, grew up wanting to play for the Ducks, and now he's a walk-on and he's starting in the middle of their offensive line. I just think it can get a little shaky for them. They're missing Matthew Bedford, a transfer from Indiana, who was their presumed starter at right guard, did not play. So Iapane Laululu played at right guard, and he was thought to maybe be the starting center. He lost that job to Pickard. He had to play at right guard. It just wasn't a great offensive line performance from Oregon. I think that offensive line is going to be good, but maybe I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. They gave up 3 sacks against Idaho. They allowed 5 sacks all of last season and gave up 3 in the opener to Idaho.
Whoa.
So they've got some offensive line stuff to figure out there, I think, quickly.
Okay. I will just say that on Saturday, I was in Morgantown, West Virginia, talking to people in the parking lot who love college football. And then on Sunday, I was at the Ohio Renaissance Festival talking to people who love dressing in Renaissance gear. And it wasn't that different. And I just like being around people who love something. And so I was considering having us play a game on this show called Morgantown or Renaissance Fair. And we would show pictures of people and you would have to guess, because you put a guy in suspenders and a coonskin cap and you could go either way. Right. But I didn't want anyone to take it the wrong way. I didn't want anyone to take it the wrong. So I feel like I should change my voice when I hold the sword like this. I do think do I look good like this with the sword over my head? Like I'm going to stab somebody?
Yeah, you look pretty menacing. Do you know what type of sword that is? Did they give you like
the stabbing kind?
Oh, the stabbing.
I don't know.
Okay.
It had a number, I think, on it, but I don't know. I don't know the rest. I can ask.
Because there are different types of swords depending on like the way the blade is fashioned and like the hilt and stuff like that, right? Like the only one I know is like a claymore. I don't know what else.
Oh,
like a Scottish claymore, but I think
the first one
longer.
I looked at
that one.
The first one I looked at was 3,000. Mike asks if it's Valerian steel. We're gonna get sued. We're gonna get sued. The first sword I asked about was like $3,000. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not getting a sword today. And then I said, do you have any cheaper swords? And they did. So I was so happy because I did not know what the sword market was like. So anyway, that's our show for Monday. We'll do a version of that every Monday. We'll tweak it. We'll make it better. We want to have fun. We want to give you information, but we want to have fun. So we'll keep trying to present this stuff in the most interesting way. But I also just am proud of the fact that I don't think there's another show out there making sure that you know something about Washington and know something about Syracuse and know something about Iowa State and know something about Nebraska. Right. So, we're not doing the Dallas Cowboys every day. We're like mixing it up. So we're going to have a big show about Michigan and the Texas game on Wednesday. I think we're going to talk about transfer quarterbacks on Tuesday. We'll make our picks on Thursday. And shout out to our guy, Tyler Shoemaker, who on Bets of the North on Friday morning, we nailed our first real money $500 wager with his +3 Notre Dame pick. So that's some money we made for charity. So we're rolling and we're grateful. We're grateful. We know that there are people who have been here. We know that there are new people. Our subscriber base on YouTube is growing, and we're super excited about that. And we just want to have a good time talking about the Northern college football teams that we know all you guys love. My plan this week is to go to Pitt at Cincinnati on Saturday. But Bill, the slate for week 2, we legitimately have 7 games I think that we could dive into, because all of a sudden it's really I think we could do 45 minutes on Georgia Tech Syracuse if we wanted to, but we're not going to have time to. But we have some great games.
Yeah, we do. Cincinnati, Pitt, Kansas, Illinois, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, Cyhawk. There's
Colorado, Nebraska.
That's the night one. Yeah.
And
the biggest
Texas,
one is the one
Michigan.
that I forgot.
Yeah.
And then Texas, Michigan. Yeah.
So some really good stuff. So we appreciate you guys being here. Thanks to everyone who makes this possible. Thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good for now. He is Bill Landis. I guess got to put it lower. That looks less like a queen, doesn't it? I don't know. He's Bill Landis, and I am your Royal Highness, Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.